Chief Adiwale was one of the wealthiest men in the city, a billionaire whose name opened doors in high places. But behind his mansion gates, money could not solve his deepest pain. His only child, Daniel, was 10 years old but had been diagnosed with selective mutism. He could speak, but he chose not to, especially to strangers or anyone outside his father and late mother. Since his mother's death 2 years ago, Daniel had shut the world out completely. The housemaids tried to engage him. Private tutors were brought in from the best schools in the country. Even child psychologists came and went. Nothing worked. Daniel avoided everyone, retreating into his world of books and sketchpads. Chief Adiwale's heart broke every time he saw his son eating alone, playing alone, sleeping alone. He would give away half his fortune just to hear Daniel laugh again. The late afternoon sun dipped low, painting the city in shades of amber and gold. Chief Adiwale leaned back in the leather seat of his black Mercedes Maybach as it cruised toward his estate. He was exhausted from endless meetings and suffocating boardroom politics, but his mind was, as always, on Daniel. The boy had refused to attend his last 2 tutoring sessions. That morning, the head housemaid had reported that Daniel had spent hours in the park beside the estate walls, drawing in his sketchbook. Normally, Adiwale would have dismissed it as his son's usual solitude, but something in the maid's tone had hinted at curiosity. As the car slowed near the park's entrance, Adiwale's eyes caught an image so foreign, so out of place, that he blinked twice to be sure. There, beneath the wide branches of a neem tree, sat Daniel, cross-legged on the grass, the breeze ruffling his hair. But he wasn't alone. Beside him was a barefoot girl. Her dress was faded, the kind that had seen too many washings, with tiny tears near the seams. Her hair, though tangled, had a natural softness, and her skin glowed in the sunlight despite a thin layer of dust. She held a small stick in her hand, using it to write letters in the dirt while Daniel watched with intent focus. And then, Daniel laughed. Not the polite, short chuckle Adiwale sometimes forced out of him at dinner, but a real laugh, unguarded, warm, alive. Adiwale's breath caught. In 2 years, no stranger had gotten within arm's reach of his son without him shutting down. Tutors had failed. Doctors had failed. Even family friends could not coax more than a nod. But here was this girl, speaking to him as though they'd known each other forever. She leaned toward him, pointing at his notebook, guiding his small hand as he wrote something down. Daniel actually listened, his body relaxed, his eyes bright, his mouth curved in a smile Adiwale had almost forgotten existed. The billionaire's heart thudded in his chest. Who was she? He told the driver to park a short distance away and stepped out quietly, his polished Italian shoes crunching on the gravel. He kept to the shadows, watching. The girl glanced at Daniel's page, corrected something with a soft laugh, and clapped once as though praising him. Daniel beamed. She didn't treat him like a fragile boy locked away in his father's golden cage. She treated him like a friend. And for the first time in a very long time, Chief Adiwale felt the stirrings of hope. When Daniel finally noticed his father standing a few steps away, his smile faltered. His small fingers froze on the notebook, and his shoulders tensed like a child caught doing something forbidden. For a heartbeat, Adiwale feared his presence would shatter the fragile magic of the scene. He expected Daniel to shut down, to retreat into his familiar, guarded silence. But the barefoot girl beside him leaned closer, whispering something into his ear. It wasn't loud enough for Adiwale to hear, but whatever she said made Daniel's grip on the notebook relax. Slowly, the boy turned toward his father. "Daddy," Daniel's voice was quiet, hesitant, yet it carried the weight of a miracle. He hadn't heard his son speak voluntarily to anyone outside the family in months. "This?" Daniel swallowed, then tried again. "This is Ada." The name fell into the air like a precious jewel. Adiwale blinked, masking his shock with a gentle smile. "Ada," he repeated, as if trying the name on his tongue. "Good afternoon." The girl stood, her bare feet brushing against the grass. She lowered her gaze respectfully, yet there was a quiet strength in her posture. "Good afternoon, sir," she said, her voice soft but steady. Her dress fluttered in the warm breeze, revealing the patched hem. A thin beaded bracelet circled her wrist, the kind sold at roadside stalls for a few naira. "Where are you from?" Adiwale asked carefully. Ada hesitated, her eyes flicking to Daniel before answering. I don't have a home, sir." She said it without shame, but with a matter-of-factness that tightened something deep in Adiwale's chest. Daniel glanced between them, then reached for her hand, a small, protective gesture that spoke louder than words. And in that quiet park, with the sun slipping lower and the scent of dust and neem leaves in the air, Chief Adiwale realized he was witnessing something no amount of wealth could buy. His son letting someone into his world. That evening, after Ada had walked Daniel back to the estate gates, Adiwale could not shake the image of her from his mind. Her tattered dress, her bare feet, the way she spoke with quiet confidence. Who was she? How had she done in minutes what trained specialists could not do in years? The next morning, Adiwale called for Musa, the head security guard. "The girl from the park," he said, his voice low but firm. "Find out who she is, and everything you can about her." By noon, Musa returned, hat in hand, his face lined with something between respect and pity. "Sir," Musa began, "her name is Adeobi, 14 years old. She lives under the third mainland bridge with her grandmother. They've been there for almost 3 years." Adiwale leaned back, his brow furrowing. Musa continued. "Her parents died in a fire that destroyed their one-room apartment. The grandmother sells roasted corn by the roadside to survive. Ada used to attend school, but she dropped out when they couldn't pay the fees. Since then, she's been teaching herself from any paper she can find, old newspapers, torn books from the trash." Adiwale pictured her in the park, carefully guiding Daniel's pencil across the page. "She's educated?" he asked softly. Musa nodded. "More than most in her situation, sir. She comes to the park because sometimes people leave behind books or magazines. That's how she met Master Daniel." Adiwale's chest tightened. "How?" "It was about a month ago," Musa said. Daniel was sitting alone, sketching. Ada saw him struggling to spell something, and she went to him, just like that. No fear, no hesitation. She corrected him gently. The boy didn't push her away. Instead, he listened. Since then, Daniel waits for her every afternoon. The billionaire's gaze shifted to the large portrait of his late wife on the wall. She had always believed that kindness could come from anywhere, that friendship didn't care about wealth or class. And here it was, proven true, in the form of a barefoot girl under a neem tree. For the rest of the day, Chief Adiwale found it impossible to focus on his business calls. Even the sharp tone of his London investors couldn't pull his mind away from the sight of Daniel laughing under that neem tree. Ada had broken through the fortress his son had built around himself. But she was homeless, barefoot, and living in a world far from his. By evening, Adiwale stood by the floor-to-ceiling window in his study, watching the sprawling estate bathed in orange twilight. The voices of the household staff drifted from the kitchen, low, curious murmurs. He didn't need to hear the words to know what they were about. Already, they had noticed Ada's visits. The maids glanced at her with a mix of pity and suspicion whenever she walked Daniel to the gates. To them, she was an intruder, a stranger from the streets, crossing into a world of marble floors and diamond chandeliers. Adiwale wrestled with himself. Was he risking Daniel's safety? What if this friendship invited gossip, or worse, exploitation? But then, the study door creaked open. Daniel stood there, clutching a sheet of paper. His small, ink-stained fingers trembled slightly, but his eyes were brighter than Adiwale had seen in years. "Daddy," he murmured, stepping forward. Adiwale took the paper and stared at it. It was a drawing, a crude but heartfelt picture of 3 figures. Himself, Daniel, and Ada. All smiling, all holding hands. Beneath it, written in Daniel's uneven handwriting, were the words, "My family." Adiwale swallowed hard. He had built an empire of concrete and steel, yet here was his son telling him, without saying it directly, that love wasn't found in walls, but in people. And in that moment, the billionaire knew he couldn't let Ada slip away from Daniel's life. The decision didn't come easily. 4 days, Chief Adiwale weighed it in his mind. The risks, the whispers it might cause, the delicate balance of a billionaire's reputation. But every evening, he saw Daniel waiting by the estate gates at exactly the same hour, eyes scanning the road until Ada appeared. Every time she arrived, Daniel's posture changed, shoulders lifted, lips curved into a smile, eyes alive. One Thursday morning, Adiwale finally told the head maid, "Set the table for 3. Tonight, we're having guests." That evening, as the sun dipped low, Ada appeared at the gate in a clean but simple dress, holding the frail hand of her grandmother. The old woman's frame was bent with age, her wrapper faded from years of use, but her eyes carried the quiet dignity of someone who had seen both joy and sorrow. The staff lined the corridor as the guests were led inside, their polite smiles hiding their curiosity. Some glanced at Ada's bare feet with thinly veiled disapproval. But Daniel didn't notice any of that. He ran forward, not in the stiff, formal way he greeted his father's friends, but with genuine excitement. He took Ada's hand and led her to the dining room as though she belonged there. Dinner was served on fine china under the warm glow of a crystal chandelier. At first, Ada sat stiffly, her fingers brushing against the polished silver cutlery as if they might shatter. But Daniel leaned close, whispering something that made her giggle softly. Slowly, her shoulders relaxed. Adiwale watched her closely. She didn't eat greedily, though the food before her was far finer than anything she'd likely seen in years. She waited for Daniel to speak before answering questions, subtly encouraging him when he hesitated. When the main course was cleared, Adiwale invited Ada to speak with him privately. They stepped out into the veranda where the garden lights cast a soft glow. "Why are you helping my son?" he asked, keeping his voice calm but searching. Ada met his gaze without flinching. "Because I know what it feels like to be alone, sir. And I don't want him to feel that way anymore." Her words landed like a weight on his heart. This wasn't charity to her. It wasn't pity. It was something deeper, something real. And for the first time in years, Chief Adiwale felt the faint but steady flame of hope for his son's healing. The park bench under the neem tree sat empty. For the first time in weeks, Daniel waited alone, his small notebook resting unopened on his lap. His eyes flicked toward the street every few seconds, searching for the familiar figure in the faded dress, but Ada never came. By the time the evening breeze rustled through the tree branches, Daniel's posture had wilted. He walked back to the estate slowly, dragging his feet, a hollow look in his eyes. It happened again the next day, and the day after that. On the 4th day, Daniel refused dinner. He sat on his bed, hugging his sketchpad to his chest. "She's not coming back, Daddy," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I think I did something wrong." The words hit Adiwale like a blow. He had spent years watching his son hide from the world. Now that Daniel had finally let someone in, she had vanished without a word. That night, Adiwale called Musa. "Find her," he ordered. By morning, the truth came back, heavy as stone. Ada's grandmother had fallen gravely ill. With no money for proper treatment, Ada had been taking any work she could find, washing clothes in the market, selling sachet water on the roadside, just to buy medicine. She had no time, no energy, and no way to reach the park. Adiwale sat in silence after hearing the report, his mind turning over the details. This girl, barely 14, was carrying burdens most grown men would crumble under. Yet she had still found the time to sit with his son, to teach him, to make him laugh. It would have been easy to write a check and send it through Musa, but as he looked out at the neem tree swaying in the wind, he knew it wasn't just about money. Ada had given Daniel something priceless, hope, and now, it was his turn to give her the same. The next morning, Adiwale's convoy rolled through the bustling streets of Lagos, but this time, the tinted Maybach didn't turn toward the boardroom or a luxury hotel. It stopped in front of a crumbling public hospital. The paint on the walls was peeling, the smell of antiseptic mixing with the faint, sour odor of neglect. Mothers sat on wooden benches clutching sick children. Nurses moved briskly but with tired eyes. Adiwale stepped out, drawing stares. In his tailored suit and polished Italian shoes, he looked like a man from another world. But his gaze was fixed, his purpose unshakable. Inside a dimly lit ward, he found Ada. She sat on the edge of a metal-framed bed, holding her grandmother's frail hand. The old woman's breathing was shallow, her skin pale. When Ada saw him, her eyes widened. She rose quickly, smoothing her skirt as though to hide its frayed edges. "Sir, what are you doing here?" Adiwale's voice was steady. "I heard you needed help." She shook her head. "We'll manage. We always do." He stepped closer, lowering his tone. "Ada, you gave my son something no doctor, no teacher, no amount of money could give," his smile. "You don't have to manage anymore." Before she could protest, he turned to the nurse. "Move her to a private ward. Best care available. Everything, on my account." Ada's lips parted, but no words came. She looked at her grandmother, then back at him, and the tears she had fought so hard to hold back spilled freely down her cheeks. By that evening, her grandmother was in a clean, quiet room, receiving treatment from attentive doctors. Adiwale arranged for them to move into a guest house on his estate once she recovered. When Ada stepped out into the hospital courtyard, Daniel was there, clutching a small bouquet of wildflowers he had picked himself. "You came back," he said softly, as if afraid she might vanish again. Ada knelt, taking the flowers. "I promised I wouldn't leave you," she whispered. And for the first time in years, Chief Adiwale watched his son's eyes light up, not with the fragile joy of a moment, but with the steady glow of hope for tomorrow. A few weeks later, the mansion felt different. The silence that used to hang heavy in the halls had been replaced with small, joyful sounds. The clink of teacups as Ada and her grandmother shared breakfast with the staff, the soft hum of Ada reading aloud to Daniel in the garden, and, most precious of all, Daniel's laughter drifting from the neem tree. On a quiet Sunday morning, Adiwale sat at the grand dining table, the smell of fresh coffee curling through the air. He was reading the business section when quick footsteps approached. Daniel burst into the room, one hand clutching Ada's, the other gripping a crumpled sheet of paper. His eyes were bright, cheeks flushed with excitement. "Daddy," he said, his voice clear and steady, not the hesitant whisper Adiwale had grown used to, but a confident call. Adiwale set the paper aside. "Yes, son." Daniel glanced at Ada, then back at his father. "I love Ada. She's my sister now." For a moment, Adiwale couldn't speak. His chest swelled, his vision blurred. Those simple words carried everything: Daniel's healing, Ada's kindness, and the bridge that had been built between two worlds. Ada looked down shyly, her fingers tightening around Daniel's hand. "Thank you for letting me stay, sir," she murmured. Adiwale stood, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. "You're not just staying, Ada. You're part of this family now." Outside, the neem tree swayed gently in the breeze, its branches casting dappled shadows over the grass. The same spot where a barefoot girl had once knelt to teach a lonely boy how to spell. It was proof that love could grow in the most unexpected places. And in that moment, Chief Adiwale knew, money had built his mansion, but kindness had made it a home.